Have you ever noticed that some people, even those who aren't the smartest, always seem to be 3 steps ahead of you? They walk into a room and suddenly everyone adjusts their behavior. They speak little, but when they do, no one dares to ignore them. It's almost irritating how these people achieve results with no apparent effort. But there's a secret, and it has nothing to do with luck, talent, or destiny. It has to do with something Machiavelli discovered over 500 years ago, but that almost no one applies. A mental trick capable of reorganizing your way of thinking, acting, and reacting to the world. A trick so powerful that if you use it, people will start treating you differently, even without realizing it. And before you imagine it's something mystical or complicated, let me tell you the counterintuitive part. This trick doesn't increase your intelligence. It unlocks what's been buried inside you all along. Because human beings don't lose due to a lack of ability. They lose due to overexposure, over-anxiety, over-explaining, over-fragility thrown on the table. Machiavelli knew that the mind only functions at maximum power when it's protected from external chaos. And this is where your reprogramming begins. You won't learn to think more. You'll learn to think better with strategy, composure, human understanding, and silent mastery. And if you're tired of being underestimated, ignored, or always being put on the safe track, this video is your turning point. Because when you apply this forbidden trick, you'll realize something terrifying. It's not that the world has become easier. It's that you finally stepped out of the role of a pawn and assumed the role of a player. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand step by step how to use this to shield your mind, increase your perception, and dominate any environment without saying almost anything. Ready? If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos. It's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul. An invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He already realized that in the real world, those who speak too soon often unknowingly hand ammunition to the enemy. Machiavelli already warned that a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands absolute mastery of silence, because it is in the empty space between one sentence and another that true power is formed. It's curious how the end justifies the means takes on a different meaning when a person understands that sometimes the most efficient means is simply to remain silent. Silence, used as a weapon, functions like the calculated use of force that keeps an entire room waiting for your next move. People don't realize it, but when they talk too much, they violate the principle of better to be feared than loved. Because those who talk incessantly lose the aura of mystery that inspires respect. And he also notes that over-explaining is almost like apologizing for existing, and this sabotages any strategy. The big issue is that when he chooses to remain silent, he forces others to show their cards first. And that's when he observes real human nature, exposed, nervous, trying to interpret his silence. A person who understands this game learns to avoid being hated not for excessive words, but for their precision. And ironically, those who fear silence fear themselves. Thus, they experience the sensation of creating their own invisible fortress. And effortlessly, they discover that silence is not absence. It is absolute presence. It's only the first step towards something even greater. He begins to realize that when he controls his words, he also controls how he is interpreted. This is the core of the appearance of virtue, appearing calm, firm, solid, even when internally there is chaos trying to explode. But it is precisely in this control that virtù and fortuna lie, a dance between skill and opportunity. And curiously, he realizes that he doesn't always need to be the smartest person in the room. He just needs to be the most unpredictable. After all, unpredictability is power because it disarms expectations and forces people to treat him with caution. In meetings, for example, while everyone tries to prove themselves, he decides to observe. When someone asks a direct question, he smiles, takes a deep breath, and answers only what is necessary, leaving a trail of calculated doubts. This is part of the calculated use of force, not giving more energy than the context demands. He understands that when he speaks little, his allies, his own loyal armies, begin to value his every word, and his adversaries become insecure, trying to decipher his next move. The beauty of this game is that he doesn't need to raise his voice. He simply needs to raise his intention. And that's exactly where a new way of reading the world begins, one that will accompany him as he delves deeper into human patterns. Over time, he realizes that silence creates an advantage that few people perceive. It gives time to think before acting. Instead of responding automatically, he observes reactions, perceives micro-gestures, and identifies the hidden fears of others. Machiavelli would say that this is one of the decisions based on real human nature, because there is no more powerful strategy than understanding why someone does what they do. Silence opens up space for this. He discovers, for example, that when someone tries to pressure him for a quick answer, that person is usually hiding insecurity, and if he remains calm, the person reveals themselves. Silence is almost a psychological interrogation without questions. Each pause is a way of forcing the other to fill the void, and in this filling, truths escape. He also learns that this behavior requires constant adaptability because each situation demands a different type of silence, sometimes firm, sometimes gentle, sometimes indifferent. The art lies in using silence as if it were a flexible weapon. And it is precisely when he masters this technique that he begins to notice a curious phenomenon. The more he observes, the more patterns begin to emerge. And that's when the next level of the game is revealed. He begins to understand that in the silent game of power, no one wins simply by observing themselves. Victory lies in observing others with the precision of a scientist. Machiavelli would call this politics guided by reality, not by ideals, because it is based on facts, not assumptions. He notices that most people say much more with their bodies than with their mouths. Restless hands, averted eyes, tense shoulders, revealing fear or insecurity. And when he pays attention to these signs, he discovers that he is accessing a kind of secret map of real human nature. In meetings, for example, when someone crosses their arms while talking about money, he understands that there lies a weakness, perhaps a hidden ambition. When the person smiles too much, tries to please quickly, or rushes to agree, he identifies the unconscious desire to be accepted. And this is always fertile ground for strategy. This is where virtù and fortuna come in. The ability to interpret and the opportunity to use this to one's advantage without needing brute force. He learns that when he only observes, he doesn't waste energy. And little by little, he realizes that deciphering human patterns is like working with his own loyal armies. The more he understands, the more armed he is. And this observation naturally leads him to the next level. Over time, something fascinating begins to happen. He starts to hear not only what people say, but what they say about others. It is at this point that Machiavelli whispers in his ear, "It is better to be feared than loved, because those who try to please everyone always talk too much." trivial conversations become clues, indicators of deep values. Some prioritize respect, others want money, others want attention, others seek security above all else. Each value reveals a type of predictable behavior, and predictability is gold for those who master the calculated use of force. He realizes, for example, that the person who speaks ill of colleagues always tries to bring someone down to rise up, and that the gossip, when pressured, reveals secrets they should never share. This is all part of politics guided by reality, understanding that no one is random, everyone follows patterns. And upon realizing this, he begins to see crises in a different way, because it is precisely in crisis that masks fall, that the veneer of apparent virtue crumbles, and the essence appears. And each time he witnesses this happen, it becomes clearer that there is an even deeper step to master. What is most striking, however, is how the past always anticipates the future. He notices that repeated behavior is a foregone conclusion. A person who shirks responsibility today will run away tomorrow. Someone who explodes with small frustrations will become unpredictable at the worst possible moment. And understanding this is almost like possessing a modern version of the end justifies the means. Because now he doesn't act impulsively. He acts based on patterns, evidence, logic. He sees that when he knows the pattern, he controls the board. And this puts him at an advantage because it allows him to make decisions that seem intuitive but are actually decisions based on real human nature. The more he observes, the easier it becomes to predict who is an ally, who is a risk, who has a hidden ambition, or who will feign friendship until it is convenient to betray. Like a general who studies the enemy before battle, he learns to choose his own loyal armies with precision. And when he masters this skill, he realizes that there is another, even more powerful one, not allowing anyone to study his movements, which leads us to the next Machiavellian secret. He realizes, after observing so much, that the most common mistake people make is believing that total transparency is a virtue. It isn't. Machiavelli already said that when someone knows your plans, they also know your weaknesses. And this breaks the logic of politics guided by reality, not by ideals. In the real world, whoever exposes everything becomes easy prey. He learns that revealing deep ambitions is like opening a safe and inviting strangers to look. That's why he creates bait objectives, superficial goals that seem important but have no real power. They are like smoke screens that preserve his true movements. In doing so, he uses the principle of the end justifies the means, not to deceive out of malice, but to protect his strategy. After all, whoever maintains the mystery can choose when to act. And it is in this calculated silence that he strengthens himself, avoiding being hated for excessive exposure and reinforcing his appearance of virtue. He speaks little, reveals even less, and effortlessly becomes someone difficult to predict. And the more unpredictable he becomes, the harder it is for someone to manipulate him. All of this prepares him for the next rule of the game. He discovers that working silently on what truly matters is like building an underground castle. No one sees it grow, but when it appears, it's too ready to be attacked. This is perfectly aligned with the principle of the calculated use of force, moving only when the force is sufficient to win. By concealing his true intentions, he controls narratives before they even exist. And this is part of virtu et fortuna, this combination of strategic skill with perfect timing to act. He understands that mystery creates respect and that sharing too much creates vulnerability. People who tell their dreams to just anyone are exposed to invisible sabotage and expectations they cannot meet. He notices how colleagues react when they try to discover his plans. Some feel curiosity, others fear, others respect. and by observing these reactions, he identifies who is truly on his side. Thus, he creates his own loyal armies, those who don't need to know everything, but know exactly how to support him when necessary. And curiously, the less he speaks, the more control he has over his own image. The big turning point happens when he understands that controlling his intentions is controlling his own narrative. Because the moment someone else defines who he is, he loses all the advantages he has gained so far. He sees innocent friends being unfairly labeled because they didn't know how to control what they revealed. He learns from this. He understands that when he chooses what to reveal and what to hide, he is following Machiavelli's central rule. Decisions based on real human nature. No one respects what they fully understand. And that's why he starts acting like those silent leaders who seem to know something everyone wants to find out. When someone asks about his plans, he answers naturally, but never in depth. He gives a small piece of the story and keeps the rest. He doesn't lie, he just doesn't offer ammunition. This is his form of constant adaptability, adjusting what he reveals as the environment demands. And when he masters this art, he realizes there is an inevitable next step. If he doesn't control the narrative, someone else will control it for him. He realizes that in the invisible game of power, whoever narrates first already wins half the battle. Machiavelli would call this politics guided by reality, not by ideals, because it doesn't matter what really happened. What matters is what people believe happened. And the human mind has a cruel tendency. The first story it hears usually becomes emotional truth, even if the facts say otherwise. This means that if he doesn't define his own narrative, someone else will do it for him, and probably in a way that harms him. He understands that narrative is like the calculated use of force, subtle but devastating when applied at the right moment. For example, when a mistake occurs at work, he speaks first, explains the scenario, frames the elements, and neutralizes distorted interpretations. This is not manipulation, it's self-preservation. He realizes that by doing this, he strengthens his appearance of virtue, even when the behind-the-scenes reality is more complex than he would like to admit. And this understanding helps him avoid being hated, because whoever tells their own story reduces the space for gossip and distortions. Gradually, he realizes that controlling the narrative is controlling his own destiny, and this paves the way for an even sharper skill. He learns that the narrative isn't just what he says about himself, but what he allows the world to see. The way he enters a room, how he behaves, how he reacts to the unexpected. All of this tells a silent story that people believe without question. Machiavelli would be smiling to see that this doesn't require brute force, only strategy. This is where virtù and fortuna come in, creating an image that works for him, even when he's absent. By framing problems before they grow, he takes the ammunition out of other people's hands, and by showing initiative, he conveys confidence, a modern way of leading his own loyal armies. He understands that every gesture is a small decision based on real human nature. People trust those who seem to know what they're doing, even if internally he's praying for everything to work out. This reinforces something crucial. If he doesn't shape his story, the environment will shape it for him. And environments, as he has already realized, are rarely kind. The most interesting thing is that this ability creates a curious feeling in people. They begin to see him as someone who is always one step ahead. Little do they know that this step is merely strategic preparation. Over time, he discovers that controlling the narrative is, in fact, controlling the value the world assigns to him. This is because value doesn't stem from objective truth, but from collective perception. He understands that when he decides to take a stand, he also decides how he will be remembered. And this requires constant adaptability, because each situation demands a different version of the story, not a lie, but a strategic framing. He sees this in practice when he observes colleagues who let others define who they are, the distracted one, the insecure one, the incompetent one. All labels created by a lack of their own narrative. Unlike them, he presents his story firmly. What he did, why he did it, what his intention is. And this creates respect, not necessarily love. And, as Machiavelli already taught, it's better to be feared than loved when it comes to strategic survival. And, by mastering this skill, he begins to see life as a series of calculated choices where hesitation means losing. Therefore, he naturally enters the next Machiavellian principle, the power to decide without asking permission. He begins to realize that indecision is not neutrality, it's postponed defeat. And nothing is less Machiavellian than someone who waits for life to decide for them. In the real world, politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands tough choices because those who hesitate lose ground to those who have the courage to act. He realizes that decisions need to be made based on results, not feelings, because feelings change with the wind, results don't. Observing strong leaders, he notices that they all have something in common. They decide before others, not always in the most comfortable way, but in the most strategic way. This aligns with the principle of the calculated use of force, not applying energy all the time, but knowing the exact moment to act firmly. And by acting this way, he inevitably avoids being hated, because decisive people convey security, even when their choices are unpopular. He begins to test this in his daily life, cutting off unproductive conversations, establishing clear boundaries, refusing irrelevant tasks. And to his surprise, people begin to respect him more. He understands that every decision is a silent declaration of power, and there is an even more strategic next step. He understands that removing obstacles, especially toxic people, is not coldness, but survival. Machiavelli said that it is better to be feared than loved when the choice involves preserving one's own stability. And this makes sense when he realizes how some relationships drain his energy, divert his focus, and distance him from virtue and fortune. The calculated decision in this case is to protect his path. He learns that respect matters more than approval. After all, those who seek to be loved too much give up their own identity to fit into the expectations of others. He sees in practice how cutting a destructive bond can be the key to regaining his mental clarity. And when someone tries to manipulate him through guilt, he remembers the principle: the end justifies the means. And the end here is emotional health and life strategy. By adopting this stance, he realizes something powerful. His decisions begin to attract more aligned, more loyal people, almost as if he were forming his own loyal armies. Each firm gesture shapes the ground for even greater decisions in the future. And it is precisely there that he realizes that no strategy works without alternative plans. Calculated decision-making doesn't mean rigidity. It means practical intelligence, and practical intelligence demands constant adaptability. He realizes that the world changes too quickly to rely solely on a fixed direction. So instead of blindly committing to a single path, he acts like a war strategist. He advances, tests, measures, corrects. He understands that decisions don't need to be final, they need to be functional. And this vision dissolves the fear of choosing. After all, if something doesn't work, he adjusts. Simple as that. And this flexibility becomes, ironically, his greatest strength. He realizes that when he decides, even without guarantees, he releases energy that was previously trapped in doubt. And this energy moves him. He sees this clearly when he compares his life to that of those who don't decide. They stand still, waiting for permission that will never come. Not him. He decides and creates movement, and it is in this movement that he perceives an inevitable truth. Those who win the most are precisely those who have the most options, which leads us to the last Machiavellian principle of this journey. He realizes that in the chess game of real life, survival is not a matter of luck, but of alternatives. Machiavelli knew this when he warned about the importance of having one's own loyal armies. Depending exclusively on external forces is to hand over your destiny to those who have no commitment to you. The same applies to modern life. Whoever puts all their eggs in one basket, one job, one source of income, one relationship, one path, builds a perfect trap for themselves. He understands that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means accepting that everything can change suddenly. The economy, people, health, opportunities, and therefore, whoever has options always has power. He begins to diversify his sources of income, exploring freelancing, simple investments like Treasury Direct or ETFs, and even creating small side projects that function as invisible guarantees. He realizes that this movement reinforces his appearance of virtue because it conveys control and solidity. And it also avoids being hated because independent people don't need to humiliate themselves to survive. The more he expands his alternatives, the less vulnerable he becomes, and this opens the way to an even deeper understanding of power. He learns that diversification isn't paranoia, it's strategy. Machiavelli would call it the calculated use of force because it requires energy only at the beginning, but then functions almost as permanent self-protection. He begins to apply this in his social circles, understanding that emotionally depending on a single person creates weakness. By expanding his connections, he builds a more stable support network made up of people who truly add value. This network functions as his own loyal armies, helping him maintain balance when one area of his life falters. He also dedicates himself to learning new skills, communication, writing, finance, leadership. All of this broadens his professional options. He understands that the end justifies the means when the goal is true autonomy. The most interesting thing is that, as he accumulates options, his confidence grows, and this completely alters how he makes decisions. Fear diminishes. Dependence disappears, and he begins to act with firmness because he knows that if one door closes, others remain open. This prepares him to see the world with more strategic eyes. But the most profound point he discovers later: having a plan B isn't a lack of faith in plan A, it's respect for one's own life. He realizes that people without alternatives live tense, desperate, and reactive lives. Those who have different paths, however, develop a natural posture of authority. This posture, ironically, corresponds to the Machiavellian principle of being better feared than loved, because it conveys strength and independence. He understands that constant adaptability is the secret that separates those who survive from those who thrive. And in practice, this means preparing escape routes, creating financial reserves, strengthening rare skills, and keeping a flexible mind to change direction when necessary. He realizes that the most powerful people in the world are those who never get stuck in a single option. And by adopting this philosophy, he finally understands the invisible game that has been happening around him from the beginning. Now, with all these Machiavellian structures aligned, he is ready to see the central message, the one that will irreversibly reprogram his vision of power. Now that you know these 6 mental structures, the real question isn't, does this work? But rather, what are you going to do with this power? Because knowing the invisible game doesn't change anything. Playing the game changes everything. You've realized that none of this requires physical strength, absurd charisma, money, or status. It only requires awareness, and awareness is a weapon that no one can take away from you. But here's the tricky part. If you don't apply this in the next 24 hours, your mind reverts to its old state, and you'll go back to being manipulated, underestimated, or ignored as always. So think about it. Who will you observe first? Which narrative do you need to adopt immediately? What decision have you been putting off that is weakening your life? And above all, what options will you build so that you never depend on anyone again? These questions are not rhetorical. They are the beginning of your new mental construct, a construct that Machiavelli would understand perfectly because it deals with autonomy, strategy, and silent power. Now it's up to you. Apply it today, experiment in your daily life, and see the world react differently. And if this content has opened your mind, then you can't miss the next videos. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and continue this journey with me. After all, strategic intelligence isn't learned in a day, but it starts right here,